Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Our topic is around fund development and how to run a successful fundraising campaign. My name is Hannah Travers. I'm the Director of Communications for the Core Network, and I will just be here to do a quick introduction and especially want to thank our presenters who I will be introducing in a moment. So before we get started, want to do a few quick reminders. We can jump to the next slide. All right, so just a reminder, if everyone can please stay on mute, we will have a Q&A section later when we invite you to use the raise hand feature if you'd like to come off mute, but please make sure that you're on mute until then. If you think of any questions during the session, we encourage you to drop them in the chat over on the right, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can from the chat once we get to our Q&A. And again, if you would prefer to use the Q&A, if you raise hand feature once we get to the Q&A, you're welcome to do that. Just a note that this session is being recorded, and we'll make the recording available on the Core Network's website later today or by tomorrow morning. You'll be able to find it under events and then webinars. And we'll drop a link in the chat later for exactly where to find it. And there will be a survey that pops up at the end of the session when you log off. So we encourage you to please take the survey. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us plan and improve future webinars. So, as mentioned, today's topic is about fund development. Most cores in the Core Network's membership are nonprofit organizations, and we know fundraising is a very important part of your work. Probably foundation grants and project dollars cover a lot of your expenses, but it's also very important to have those flexible dollars on your balance sheet. So today we will mostly be talking about engaging individual donors and running fundraising campaigns. So let's see. I will now like to introduce our presenters for today. We'll be hearing from a presenter from the Orr Group, which is a nonprofit fundraising and consulting group. And then we will also be hearing from the Student Conservation Association, which is a member of the Core Network. First, we will hear from Brandon Worth, who's from the Student Conservation Association, and then we will hear from Melissa Cheng, who is director at the Orr Group. So first, I will kick it over to Brandon to get started.
All right, thanks, Hannah, and thanks to the Core Group for inviting us here today. So my name is Brandon Worth. I'm the Director of Direct Response Fundraising at the Student Conservation Association. And for those who might not be familiar with the SCA, we are an organization that gets young people involved in doing service work everywhere from urban parks to national parks and forests. And I've been with the organization for almost a year now, so almost a whole campaign calendar completed, which is what I'm going to talk to you all about today. Some of the things that we think about at the SCA as we are planning a campaign calendar for the year. It's a good time to be talking about this because we're an organization that's on a fiscal year that runs April to March. So we are very much in the thick of budgeting and campaign planning and all that good stuff for the year. So this is all really top of mind. So I am going to share my screen, share a few slides with you all. All right, can everyone see my screen? For a thumbs up. Yep. Okay, great. So just kicking off, so wanted to share some of the key things that we think about at the SCA when we're planning our campaign calendar for the whole year. And these are in no particular order, but some of the things that we think about capitalizing on key giving moments. So those would be things like December, Giving Tuesday, times when The public has really been trained to give. Of course, you want to have a strong presence, and be making a strong fundraising case then. Uh, Also too, just want to emphasize sort of a negative here, or the negative side of filling out your calendar, which is fill in some space to rest your donor file. So this is a little bit top of mind right now. This and the next point, which is about planning time in your calendar, of course, for those key giving moments and those key campaigns, but also some really dedicated time for cultivation and stewardship. So it's top of mind because this time of year, January and February, coming out of a big calendar year end giving push, we're in a period right now where in our calendar where we're, especially from fundraising appeals, we're giving our donors a break from those types of messages and really leaning into cultivation and stewardship, stewarding those gifts that were made at calendar year end, and cultivating engagement for our next campaigns. So the fourth point here, scheduling campaigns for times that are relevant to your mission and donors. Again, we're a conservation organization, so we've got in just a few weeks here, hard to believe it'll be April, Earth Month. So that's something that we build into our campaign calendar as well. It's important to us and our mission. It's important to our donors. So we use it as a key giving and campaign moment. Also planning around financial needs. I'll give some examples of this as we look at our campaign calendar. But we're all here as fundraisers, so it is those financial needs that we're looking to answer. And then the last point I would make is just to always be planning your campaign calendar. So this is something that's also kind of top of mind and timely right now, coming out of the calendar year-end giving season, with some of the project management tools that we use and the way we plan at the SCA. As we've been doing our wrap up and looking at final reporting on calendar year end, we're taking insights from that wrap up and reporting and have a place that was actually established as we were executing the most recent campaign in December, where there were some things that came up at crunch time as we were ready to launch, or while we were executing the campaign, that was like, hey, can we try this? We might not be able to shoehorn it into this campaign, but put it in the planning for next year's campaign. Same with those learnings from doing kind of the postmortem on that, where we're a year, barely a year out from the next campaign, but already have a place within our project management tool where some good insights on things we want to try are going. All right, so just taking a look at a real basic high level fundraising campaign calendar that we use at the SCA, touching on some of the things that I mentioned before, but kind of starting just looking at this overall. At the SCA, we basically have 4 main campaigns, fundraising campaigns throughout the year. One large campaign at calendar year end, kind of one medium-sized campaign in terms of the amount of marketing that we're doing and the fundraising goal that's going to be at mid-year, and then kind of 2 smaller campaigns. So roughly a campaign every quarter, 2 small, 1 medium, and 1 large. So just kind of going through the months. In January, again, we're really focused on stewardship coming out of calendar year end. January is also a great time for sustainer conversion. So that's something that we just kind of wrapped up some of in January. We do it throughout the year, but we made a big push in January as we shared our plans for the year. This is all the work that we're going to be doing throughout the year. We wrapped in a call to action to become a sustainer monthly donor to support that throughout the year. And then into February, and really looking down the middle column here at sort of those middle months of each quarter, that again, that's what I was mentioning before about really building in dedicated time for cultivation and stewardship. So we're doing some of that right now, including cultivation, heading into March and April. Some examples of a couple of things I mentioned before. So our fiscal year ends in March. Building some campaign moments around financial needs. It's a great time to be sharing a message of helping us finish our budget year strong. April is also Earth Month, so we kind of tie those things together in a campaign that actually kind of spans 2 fiscal years. Again, May, stewardship and cultivation. June and July is when we do our mid-year campaign. You know, again, there's a lot of factors that go into where you put campaigns on your calendar. I'm a big proponent, and the SCA has had a lot of success with a mid-year campaign that falls in the summer. It's also an example of what we do in June and July, of timing a campaign around what's relevant to our mission. June and July is our biggest time of year for the work that we do and having crews in the field. So it's a great time to be doing fundraising around really sharing that real-time work that's happening in the field. You know, of course, calendar year end, like a lot of orgs, is our biggest fundraising time. It's when a lot of our programs have really wound down. So we don't really have a lot of like, this is happening right now type of messaging to share, but we do in June and July in the summer. So we capitalize on that. September, we have another small campaign, a one-day alumni giving day campaign, and I'll talk a little bit about how we engage alumni in a moment. And then again, October, November, really leaning into cultivation and stewardship, heading into December year end and leading up to Giving Tuesday. With, you know, November, a lot of times we're thinking past Thanksgiving to Giving Tuesday, but you know, I would really recommend, if you're not doing it already, to really think about Thanksgiving as a time to have some really timely thank you messages that can be some great stewardship and also cultivation to build engagement heading into Giving Tuesday. So thinking about how we engage alumni, a few key things. We've got a great cohort of alumni at the SCA, so we really try to capitalize on that as much as possible through things like segmenting and customizing our messages. So with our email messages and direct mail, for example, we're always segmenting by things like giving segment. So, you know, if you're a lapsed donor or a more recent donor, but also almost always having a custom message for our alumni donors as well, that, you know, a lot of times is like doing less of the like educating on this is why our programs are important, and leaning into, you know, why our programs are important, you experience it firsthand, help give other young people the opportunity to have the experience you had. So that can be either, we do some of that with like some dynamic content in emails where will be a couple sentences that get customized if you're an alumni. Sometimes we'll do a full message that's just for alumni. And that kind of leads into the second point, utilizing fellow alumni. So this on the left is an example of a just for alumni email that we did at Giving Tuesday, and we utilized another alum as the sender, our alumni council head, and, you know, pulled in some of that messaging I was talking about his personal experience in the SEA, and really making a case for why it's important. Building campaigns specifically for alumni. So I mentioned our Alumni Giving Day campaign a minute ago. That's something that's been really successful for us, to have a campaign that really leads with alums and their support. And in that campaign and some of our others, we're often setting alumni specific goals. So it's probably a little hard to see, but the email message on the right is one that came from our head of alumni engagement, whose photo is a little bit cut off, but that was a video that she shared in an email with some text that was similar, doing some cultivation leading up to our Alumni Giving Day and announcing our alumni goal and how important it was to have alumni help us reach that goal for just the overall health of our programs. And then the last thing I would say, give alumni a break from time to time. We do have a little bit of a sort of abbreviated like email cadence or direct mail cadence for alums. Again, they need less engagement. They need less of the case made about why it's important. They know that already. So we try to give them a mix of cultivation and appeals that leans a little bit more heavy into cultivation, newsletters, et cetera, keeping them up to date. They don't necessarily need to be prodded with appeals quite as often. So how we promote giving campaigns, a few key things to touch on. The two main things up there in italics that I would always say is integrating channels is important, and cultivation is really important too. So if you're just thinking about, what your calendar year-end campaign looks like in December, you're missing out on a great opportunity to really be building in some like key cultivation moments in October and November and throughout the year. So our program is, I focus mostly on our direct response, which is integrated, as I mentioned, but we divide it into two main categories: direct mail and digital. So with direct mail, I've worked earlier in my career, worked with organizations that were less integrated, where especially direct mail was kind of its own island, doing its own thing. We take a different approach at the SEA, and make sure that the messaging that you're seeing in our direct mail has things like the matching language that you see on this outer envelope in the top right, echoes a lot of the messaging and goals of the campaign. We also use direct mail to promote digital campaigns. So Giving Tuesday is primarily a digital campaign, but we took a look at our file and saw that we've got a lot of donors and potential donors who we have physical snail mail addresses for and permission to mail, but either don't have email addresses or they're not opted in to receive emails from us. So for some of the key digital giving campaigns, we'll send a simple postcard with a short vanity URL and a QR code, but again, reaching those folks that we can't reach digitally to tell them we have a digital campaign and they should go online to give. Within digital, we're making sure our website is top to bottom promoting the campaign. So that's the example you see in the bottom left. Making sure that we're using our organic social media channels. That was kind of an interesting thing we found from this calendar year-end campaign. Like I'm sure a lot of organizations have been experiencing, we've seen the decline in performance from paid social. But interestingly, especially at Giving Tuesday, we saw, and this is an example of a Giving Tuesday video post we did on Instagram, we saw organic social get a tick up. So, good to see that unpaid organic social is doing really well. Then email, social and digital ads, text messaging. I'll share some examples of those in a second, but I'll also make the point to campaigns are a great time to test new channels. The SEA tested some connected TV video spots in this year-end campaign and have seen some promising results from that. So I would definitely recommend setting aside some of your budget for that. So on the next slide, just looking at some of our emails, this whole slide is just some of the cultivation messages that we did. So you'll see some donate buttons on here, but we really used the time, especially in November leading up to Giving Tuesday and December, to do things like on the left, we had a photo contest for favorite fall photo, lots of those thank you messages. So thank yous from our crew members. So on the right here, you see a handwritten letter from a crew member that we were able to get into an email. Next to that is a message from our founder that we sent out around the holidays. We did some things like some quizzes. Can you identify the species of tree that our crew members have planted so many hundreds of? So that's just cultivation. And then going into appeals, and of course, these things, cultivation and appeals we were heavy leading into the campaign, but we did some cultivation messages once we were into the core appeal season two to just take a pause from making an ask to like reinforce our case a little bit. But, you know, even our appeal messages were pretty heavy on content, showing examples of our work on the right here, showing that we have a wide geographic reach so that no matter where our donors are, they could be assured that we had work going on in their area. A few more examples of those. I would just point out on here, so these are getting a little bit closer to New Year and the end of December. We really leaned into talking about the work that we we're planning for the next year. And also just the second and third position emails here too. I'll just make the point to give your email cadence some variety, and don't hesitate from doing some really you know, basic kind of plain text type messages. We saw some really good performance from those. Just an example of a few of our social and digital ad creative that we did. Text messaging, and this is my last slide here, but text messaging has worked really well for the SEA. You know, I am on a ton of text lists. I am personally on some text lists from some organizations that don't reach me via direct mail or email. And it can be kind of annoying to only get messages that are fundraising asks with no cultivation. That's something I see a lot from organizations, but at the SEA, we try to build cultivation and stewardship into our text messaging program too. So in January, we did a video text message from our fundraising officers to donors in their portfolios, just really thanking them and talking about our plans for the year. Great stewardship moment. We also try to, leading up to a fundraising text in the week leading up to it, send out a text first that doesn't have an ask at all, that's just built around engagement. So like for our mid-year campaign this year, we did a text message that was kind of a quiz that was relevant to some of the work that we had going on in the field at the time. It was something like, can you identify this species of sea turtle that our crew members are currently taking action to help protect? And so just kind of use that to sort of get folks engaged ahead of a follow-up fundraising ask text message that was coming. We also ran into this year some changes with our text messaging provider where their pricing changed, where length of text started to cost us more. So we, as a solution around that, we were able to use MMS messages with some media attachment. We use that sort of here on the left. You can see we kind of use that to get around the increased pricing for having a longer message. So used an image with text, but really found that these were really engaging for donors too, and was a great format to just kind of supplement the messaging that comes through in the text message itself with some graphics. These actually, you can't see it here, but they had some animation to them and stuff like that. So just some examples of some of the channels and tactics we use, and a little bit of thinking around how we use those. I've not been watching the chat. I'm not sure if there's questions, if we wanted to go to questions, or are we holding those for the end? Yeah.
Yeah, there have been some great questions in the chat, and we will hold those to the end. So
Okay,
encourage people
great.
to keep adding questions to the chat as they
All
come up.
right. Well, I'll pass it back to you then, Hannah, and answer some of those questions when we get to it.
Yeah, thank you very much. There was some really valuable information there, especially around campaign timing and the importance of cultivation and sharing those non-donation appeal messages throughout the year. Really interested to hear how you include alums in your giving plans. That's an important part, I think, for a lot of the organizations on the call. And yeah, thank you. We appreciate hearing from one of our member organizations and how you handle your donation campaigns. Some really practical information that hopefully other cores can consider. So yeah, again, people can please continue to add questions in the chat, and we'll get to those when we are at the Q&A session, but for now, I will turn it over to Melissa at the Orr Group.
Hi, all. Thank you. I'm Melissa Chang. I'm a director at the Orr Group. Apologies, my voice is a little scratchy. I had COVID and I'm still recovering. So if I cough or take a sip of tea, thanks for being patient. The Orr Group is a nonprofit consulting firm. So all different nonprofits of every cause we get to work with. A lot of us came from in-house fundraising teams. My specialty is in corporate and foundation fundraising, but I also did previously work with boards and individual giving or annual fund work. A lot of the stuff Brandon shared is fantastic, and I think very helpful for understanding the way that we can kind of systematize our communications to a much larger group of donors. So what I'm going to share is kind of what I think of as the general, funnel for fundraising, and hopefully from there we can also, dive into questions more specifically. But to give you an idea, okay, this is what I call the fundraising funnel, right? At the top of this, we're trying to gather all of the prospective donors' contact information. If you're at a really small org, that is starting with your leadership team, board, literally people that you know who might literally start giving to you only because they're like, oh yeah, I know Brandon or I know Melissa, like they're doing good work. I want to donate $50. That's my friend. And then also, like, who knows? You never know who people know. They could have a neighbor who sits on a company with a budget to give to local community orgs. You really never know. And LinkedIn is such a helpful tool for finding out the connections and second connections we may have. So after gathering your big pool of prospective donors, we call these prospects, we want to share about our organization and why our work matters. I think so often when we're close to the work, it can be a little hard to talk about what is actually relevant to people outside the field. You may be so familiar with all the terminology and exciting projects and things like that, but what I've found is when I talk to different clients, through many conversations, I'm gathering information to understand, oh, okay, like big picture, this is why this organization matters in this community. They are providing services for, young people who have aged out of the school system, or people who might not have the access that they would normally have to resources because of a language barrier, whatever it is. Boiling down all of your work into something concise, what matters, the ROI or that personal story is what I would say we want to convey to these donors. And that would be kind of the meat of your email campaign, or, the little square that you produce for social media. That's the case that we're trying to make. Something we want to remember, and especially for building personal relationships with donors, is to be very authentic. We don't want it to come off salesy. Brandon mentioned this, like, alumni already have a great relationship and they had their own experience. So you don't need to sell it to them that hard. Be real with them. Think of it kind of like you're a friend talking to your friend. You want to check in with them genuinely and be relevant to what matters to them. If, we think of not just, it's still pretty present, right? COVID, everyone was thinking of COVID, and all the cases of many orgs were relating their work back to the relevance of how does being in lockdown further impact the group that my organization is trying to serve. So being true and authentic to what is happening in your community, what's happening in society, very helpful. And remember that people aren't going to give just in the first one time that you ask them. I mean, they might if they're your friend, or if you're asking your sister or your, mentor, but most times we say that it takes 6 to 8 interactions before someone makes a gift. When we say interactions, we mean, not 6 times of them attending an event with you per se, but 6 meaningful moments where they had that takeaway of like, oh yeah, that organization is really interesting. I like what they're doing. And then hopefully they make a gift. When any donor makes a gift of any size, we want to make sure to thank them. Oftentimes this can be an automated thing. If you have a donation page set up, it can automatically send a note that says like, thank you so much for your donation of $5 or $50. But if you're able to, and you can comb through that list of donations, we also want to thank people personally. And if we can't thank all of them personally, let's pick out that higher tier of donor. Let's say make a threshold and say, okay, we have capacity to send 50 personal notes in the next week. who are our 50 biggest donors and send personal notes to them. That personal note, like when you give to an org and someone writes you back a personal note to be like, oh my gosh, thank you for your gift, makes such a difference. It's like getting a personal thank you. If you can and you get the mailing info and it's a really nice gift, I would even send a handwritten note. I know it's old fashioned, but I think that type of thing works very well for major gifts. The way that I think about fundraising is that, you might not be, as a fundraiser, the boots on the ground doing program work, but you are building allies with other groups that have the connections, the resources, the clout to help you achieve your mission. Good fundraising is building allies in that work to make your vision possible. So all of it is impact work. It's just a different kind of impact work than program work. On the right hand here, I've kind of built out what we literally think of as working with our board or leadership to build those prospect lists. So something we're actually doing at the core network right now too is talking with the fund development committee to see, who are the donors that they know. We're looking at lists of foundations that we're interested in. This is meaning that we're asking them, can you go check out, your LinkedIn or your alumni networks or listservs that you're on and see if you know anyone at these organizations. Make personal introductions from the people at those organizations or that donor prospect, especially if it's a high level prospect, with the development team staff to say, hey, I'm interested in connecting you to my friends at the core network because they do great work. I think you guys align in your interest in, climate resilience or whatever your overlap could be. And then you can kind of kick it to the development team. I guarantee they will know what to do, take it from there to engage in a deeper conversation and hopefully build a, custom partnership. So that would be on the right-hand side, this like higher level donor way we think of designing partnerships. But in general, I think the funnel kind of represents this idea that in the whole universe of people, how can we contextualize our work to be relevant to them? How can we be authentic in that ongoing cultivation? And then once they make a gift, how can we steward them thoughtfully so that they remember year and year again to give? So those are some of the ways that I think of fundraising. And then on the next slide, we had some prep questions. I don't know if this is too detailed, but I'll kind of dive into some of the ideas that we had. When thinking of goal setting for your fundraising campaign, I think of it in two ways. So at the Orr Group, we have worked on really large campaigns. In some of my past work, I've done a $75 million racial equity campaign for Echoing Green, a $100 million campaign for Ms. Foundation for Women doing gender equality. Those campaigns and the campaign feasibility we did was a bit more complicated. We built a very bold goal, knowing that there's a whole universe of fundraising out there, and we don't even know exactly where it'll come from, but we know that we can pursue it. So the first example I would say is just scope out this bold goal and make it bold, because that could be framed in a really inspiring way for your donor community. For example, you could say 100 students are waiting for our support and we're ready, but we need $100,000 to meet this need. And that is why you have a $100,000 goal. Another way to do it, which I've done with very small orgs that aren't even yet officially 501c3, but are like grassroots, set a smaller goal that you know you can meet so that you have that exciting, like, we hit the thermometer, amazing, thank you. Kind of announce that first milestone and then set a second milestone. I'll show you an example in a second of what that could look like. Another thing we talked about was messaging for your campaign. Like when we're boiling down what really matters to put into the content of that email campaign or that one square that is going to be shared a million times, hopefully on Instagram and Facebook and the things, let's think of storytelling or return on investment, right? Heartfelt stories or spotlights on individuals in your program are the most compelling. Like a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you can show a heartfelt, actual individual that is served through your programs, that is way better than having a massive long text that you're trying to explain a story. If it's a personal note, like let's say you're getting your board to send lift notes. Sorry, it says my connection's unstable. Let me know if it's freezing up at all. Thank you. If you're asking your board or someone else to send a lift note would be like, hey, can you connect me to so-and-so? Have that board member or that person share their personal story of why they support the organization. And Brandon talked about this as well, segmenting donors. When we think about our pool of donors, if you have a whole group, for example, I was at City Year Education Nonprofit. They have, hundreds of AmeriCorps members every year. When we reach out to alumni every year, we're not sending a note from the current director that they may not be familiar with. They did, 1 to 2 years of service in AmeriCorps. We keep track of who their impact manager was at the time that they served. And we actually keep relationships with a lot of those people to say, hey, are you okay with us using your name in this email to say that, hey, your impact manager wants to reach out to their old like PS 96 team or whatever school team they had. We use that because we know when you see a note from your old impact manager, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I'm going to open the email. So that personal touch is what hopefully will help get more clicks and opens. And then you'll also see other donors, especially a lot of our like financy donors, are driven by return on investment. They want to see what can their $100 donation achieve or $1,000 donation achieve. This can motivate them to understand the value of their donation. And it's not that you are directly promising that exact unit of thing. You're giving them an example of the impact that you can do. I'm going to show you an example really quick too from the org I mentioned. Queen's Care Collective is a mutual aid that I worked with during COVID. And this is an org that really started from a collection of just community members who had a lot of nonprofit experience. They saw a need in their community for resources, food, PPE, things like that weren't being met. They were getting refrigerators and like insulated pantries set up on sidewalks where people could self-serve for whatever needs they had. And the concept of the work of mutual aid is also one that is really about community caring for each other. It's not about getting giant grants. Excuse me, 1 second while I cough. Apologies. This was a site we had, and at the time, the site had a thermometer that would look really exciting. It would fill up the thermometer as we got more donations. But what I did with this group, and it was literally a group of say 20 people, I talked with all of them for a long time to understand the work they were doing, some of the stats they had. They did have some really great data eval people who made an Airtable about the budgets and how they were using all the tiny donations to purchase things. And so we were able to come up with some stats that were very compelling about, the ROI that I had mentioned, $20 can feed a family or $200 adds PPE. We made a cute little chart that shows actually where that spending goes. And this took off when we did a very short campaign during Giving Tuesday. We shared it with a few other small mutual aid orgs and a few activists on social media, and just that organic social took off. It ended up getting picked up by Bella Hadid, a bunch of fashion people, Diet Prada. We were very surprised by that, but very happy to get their support. And in the end, we actually beat our initial goal, which I think says here we had a $7,000 goal, and then we set a bigger 20K goal. So that was that concept I said of, if you're hoping to have that excited, thrill of beating goal number 1 with your community, blast it out, and then round 2, hit them up again and say, help us beat goal number 2. This is one example of how we did that. Every org is going to be different in the community that they are talking to. So I would also think carefully about what is the group that supports you. With certain orgs I've worked with, social media is the strongest platform for them. So rather than make lots of email campaigns, we devoted energy and resources into a very strong but simple website that looked good on mobile, and a couple little squares that people could post and put their personal caption with a link for giving. For other orgs I've worked with, their donor base is, mixed in age. They're still used to getting a paper letter in the mail with a little tearaway sheet and a check and an envelope, things like that. So think about the type of community that you are talking to and how they're used to being engaged. And then, too, as Brandon had mentioned, text groups. I have seen some of those big mass text, solicitations. Not my favorite, to be honest, but I think what can be very effective is if you're talking about engaging your board, sometimes it is as simple as telling your board, hey, here is a link and some copy language. Text your people and ask them to give on Giving Tuesday. And that is the fastest and easiest way for them to be like, yes, I can do that for all my people, versus asking them to navigate their LinkedIn, their social media, their email blasts. Like, you'll see in talking to your leadership and board what their level and ability for partnering with you on fundraising could be. Overall, I think, I would say that things I think about are simple, clean messaging of storytelling, or that ROI, and being very authentic, and make sure you thank every donor if you can. I think when we thank donors, we keep that relationship going, and hopefully they'll stay in the community and keep thinking of us. That's what I got for now.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. And thanks again for powering through while you're still healing. But great information from both Brandon and Melissa. Thank you so much. We will move into our Q&A now. And I did see a few in the chat, but feel free to continue dropping questions there, or raise your hand using the raise hand feature, or come off mute when you get the opportunity. But I will jump right into the questions from the chat, both of which I think were posed at Brandon. So Anne asked, to put this into context, can you share budget size and development, total, and or donor community size?
Yeah, sure. So at the SEA, we have an expense budget for fundraising of about $1.5 million annually, and raise about a little over 3 million each year. Of course, we are an organization, because of the work we do, probably like some of the other orgs represented here, where philanthropy, individual giving is actually, compared to what I'm used to from other organizations, it's a smaller piece of the pie, because a lot of our revenue comes through government contracts, and of course, institutional giving is a big part of what we do too. And then in terms of donor community size, yeah, we have about 25,000 active annual donors. That helps to kind of size up some of what I talked about today. But there's a big part of our budget is direct mail. We're an organization that's been around for over almost 70 years now. And we've got a great legacy direct mail program, but I didn't talk about that a lot today, because that is a big expense for us, and just knowing that there would probably be some different organizations of different sizes. I kind of leaned into the digital a little bit more, because hopefully some of what I shared, if you have a smaller budget or a larger budget, it's still applicable.
Thanks, Brandon. And to build on that, Gregory also asked, what are you using for donor management, and how much are you spending on it? And then also, can you speak to resource allocation, so time and money for small, medium, and large campaigns versus time dedicated to nurturing major donor relations? Loaded question.
Sure. Yeah. So at the Student Conservation Association, we use Blackbaud NXT for donor management, and we have a package that includes Illuminate Online, which we use for email fundraising and for powering our donation forms. I actually had to double check. I couldn't find the exact number real quick, but I believe we spend, for that full suite that I mentioned, donation forms, email, the Blackbaud reporting, and just giving, all that. I think it's a little over 100,000 a year for that. And then what was a resource allocation? Yeah, so that's a great question. And I would say that yeah, when I mentioned small, medium, and large size campaigns, primarily what I was talking about was the length of the campaign, the goal, how much money we raise in terms of sizing those up, but that's also basically applicable to the amount of effort and the spend that goes into those two. I will say that it's interesting though in terms of effort and dollars and return. So from an ROI perspective, our kind of medium campaign, that mid-year campaign, is the one that has, like, just looking at the campaign on its own, has the lowest ROI. But that being said, key milestone moment mid-year, looking beyond just that campaign in a vacuum and looking at the kind of tentpole role that it plays in our full giving calendar. When looking at it that way, there's a greater ROI to that campaign, in the sense that we're building a lot of engagement at that midpoint of the year. And even it was a little bit before my time, but I think so I can't speak to the specifics, but like a lot of organizations, we pulled back on some stuff when the COVID pandemic first started, and of course giving trends went completely haywire then. So it's a little hard to suss things out, but we're able to see that when we pulled back a bit on that mid-year campaign, that it had an effect for down the line for the rest of the year.
I would also add other popular CRMs. So like Salesforce is probably one of the biggest right now. Definitely more expensive, but also has a lot of functionality. So if you have a programs team that is tracking impact, and you have finance interested in reconciliation for grant deployment, those are things that Salesforce has like eaten the pie on. NXT is probably the like OG built on Razor's Edge, so it is also very popular, and both I would say are good in their own ways, handy for reporting in different ways. And agreed, Brandon, I think like different times for different campaigns. If you do an off-season major campaign that is very inspiring, there's a chance you're cannibalizing into the next campaign. It kind of varies. You don't always know, like we didn't know COVID was going to happen. That could in some ways be viewed as some of the most successful campaigns for some orgs, but was it in other ways cannibalizing from their typical calendar of campaigns? Probably. Depends on how you look at the breakdown of your asks across the year.
That's a great point.
Yeah, thank you both. We have another question in the chat. So ideas for creating a culture of giving, starting with the member experience, how to encourage relationships with alums when they may be at a time in their lives where they are focused on giving time rather than treasure.
Melissa, if I don't know if you had thoughts, especially on the first part of the question, the general question. I could definitely take that, but if you want to take that part, I could talk a little bit about alums.
Yeah, sure. I think the culture of giving, I mean, we talked about this at City Year, like everyone can serve. And that idea translates well, I think, into the idea that the minute you become an alumni too, there's still something you can do. And I think a lot of it can be about just showing that even small dollar amounts make an impact. And rather than making it about dollars given with certain alumni campaigns I've seen, rather than only counting dollars, we've done things like say, oh, we want to have every class give, and showing the percentage of each class that has given to show that support across many years. And so counting participation versus dollar amount can be helpful. I think this also speaks to something we think a lot about in fundraising as well, with like equity within the donor community, that we don't want to overly elevate just the few that give the largest gifts, but that we want everyone to feel that they have a part. And I think when we kind of convey that message pretty honestly with prospects and donors, and say like, it's important to us that the members today are supported by people previously who have recognized their experience, have lived their experience, that is also very inspiring. I think makes people realize that they don't want to just leave it to somebody else to give. They want to be connected to that work still.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would add to that with just some examples of some things that we've done at the SEA. As Anne referenced in the question, a lot of times with alums, our alum file skews younger, earlier career. And so as I mentioned before with I think I was making the point about giving your alumni file a break just because they maybe don't need quite as much reinforcement. It's also that there's going to be a segment within that segment of young alum early in career who just are not in a great position to give. So we've really tried to think about the long-term donor journey of those alums, and that especially for the younger alums, we want to focus a little bit more on keeping them engaged, and not necessarily pushing giving quite as much, although that is present, but just toning it down a bit. But also in terms of like using time rather than treasure. I love the way that's phrased. Some things that we've tried for as Melissa mentioned around giving, focusing on participation goals. So I think one of the examples I showed where we had our alumni chair emailing our alums and talking about the goals for that campaign, that was a participation goal. So rather than we're looking to raise this huge amount of money, we're looking to get X number of alumni giving today. Is something that we've done. Also the example that Melissa gave of participation across geographic areas, we did that a couple alumni giving days ago where we set a goal around we want representation from all 50 states. We had a program leader like at the end of the day, like kind of frantically calling alum that they had served with in, I think, Mississippi or someplace, a smaller population state where we don't work as much, to like, really, is anyone still in Mississippi who can just make a donation? We're 49 states in. So it was talking about the effort that goes in some campaigns, it was a little outsized, but we did it. We got representation from all 50 states, and it was something alumni felt good about. And then we also, will give them a social media toolkit. So if you can't give, or you can only give a little bit, also share your authentic experience on social media to encourage your network to give on these days. And then a lot of the texting that I talked about, I should have mentioned too. The platforms that we use are peer-to-peer texting tools. And so in a lot of cases, with the size of file that we have at the SEA, and even smaller size files, you really need a lot of person power to deploy those texts and respond to those text messages. And so that's something we've utilized alumni for in the past too, where it's kind of like there's a lot of great benefits, but two main ones for that is that, it's a kind of a volunteer opportunity that alumni can do to stay involved, and then receiving those messages from an alum as opposed to a fundraising professional like myself has a lot more authenticity to it as well too.
I love your map idea, Brandon, of 50 states. I can visualize that as a really cute campaign, lighting up all the states of donors in every state.
Yeah, that's kind of what we did. Again, it was before my time, but I've experienced one of those campaigns here at the SEA, and while we didn't this past September, we did not do the 50 states, but for another great point, we had a custom web experience for that, and in the past it filled in the states, but also this past giving day just ticked up our count of participation of donors so that folks could follow along throughout the day.
Thank you both. I think we have another few minutes, can take another question or two. Welcome anyone to come off mute or raise your hand if you have one.
This is Greg from Onondaga Earth Corps again. I am curious how executive directors are involved with fundraising, or if you have any suggestions as a director who's been very much in a grassroots role, building the capacity of the organization. As we've grown, my board is looking at having fundraising be more of my role. So I'm curious what your experience and or advice might be for an organization where our budget's about 1.3 million for the whole program, whole entity.
I can start, Brandon, if you'd like. Actually, Mary Ellen Sprinkle is on right now, who's also an executive director at the Core Network. Something we do a lot with clients at the Orr Group is have regular prospect meetings with our executive directors or CEOs. We literally go through their calendar and ask them, who did you meet this week? And can we help tee up any notes for you so that you can deepen those relationships? And it could be a more strategic partnership type of partner, or it could lead to a funder opportunity. We don't always know. And I think Mary Ellen's a great example of someone who's like constantly talking to different people across policy, funders, and truly the world is amazingly small. You never know who people know. So that's something that we do a lot. And having that buddy with you, it could be a chief of staff, it could be a development director, whoever, who can help you execute on building relationships and continuing to check in with those people throughout the year, kind of like a campaign calendar, but more individualized for these high touch contacts, would be one way that you can kind of get your toe deeper into the fundraising world. And then also, I think if you have that board, outright asking them, who do you know that we could connect with who might be interested in our impact? They may be connected to companies that have a foundation or CSR, corporate social responsibility office. So they could be open to sponsoring small events or giving you a small grant to do something. Or it could be a foundation contact or family foundation. And so all of those are ways that you can slowly build those relationships and hopefully feel authentic as well. But I think it does take time to kind of put yourself out there and network and organize yourself to, every week or every 2 weeks be sending those notes out so that you're maintaining relationships with all the amazing people who you come across who may be learning about your work for the first time.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add on top of that. That was all great stuff. I guess I'm just putting the angle of I'm on the direct response, a little bit more of the mass marketing side of things. We at the SEA make sure that some of our like newsletter products are coming from our CEO and president. So, that's a great way to, like, we have 2 physical direct mail newsletter products that we send out each quarter, and one of those goes to kind of more VIPs, and they're both about our work and our impact and all of that. But our president's report is a bit more like inside baseball, in a way that really kind of shows some higher value donors that, you're really valued, and we're going to give you a little bit more like behind the curtain view. And that's something that's worked really well for us.
Thank you both.
All right, well, thank you, Melissa and Brandon, for sharing, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. A reminder that today's slides and recording will be available on our website later today and tomorrow morning. We invite you to check out our event calendar on the Core Network's website for more information about upcoming virtual and in-person events. We currently have 3 webinars on our calendar in the coming days. First, we have 2 informational sessions on the Working Lands Climate Corps. This is a new initiative through the American Climate Corps. The Corps Network released an RFP this week seeking organizations to host Working Land Climate Corps members. More information can be found at corpsnetwork.org/WLCC. There will be informational sessions about this opportunity at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on February 15th and at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on February 20th. And then we have a webinar on March 5th about addressing stress among Corps members and staff and preventing burnout. And the link to register for that is in the chat. And finally, we invite you to join us at the Corps Network's 2024 National Conference, which will be happening March 19th through 21st in Washington, D.C. We encourage you to register soon, and the link should also be in the chat. And once again, thank you. We hope to see you again in future webinars.